Okay, I'll start with 2 Kings 21, 1 through 16. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hephzibah, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the abominations of the nations whom the Lord has cast out before the children of Israel. For he rebuilt the high places which Hezekiah his father had destroyed. He raised up altars for Baal and made a wooden image, as Ahab, king of Israel, had done. And he worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. He also built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, "In Jerusalem I will put my name." And he built altars for all the host of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord. Also he made his son pass through the fire, practiced soothsaying, used witchcraft, and consulted spiritists and mediums. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger. He even set a carved image of Asherah that he had made in the house of which the Lord had said to David and to Solomon his son, "In this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever, and I will not make the feet of Israel wander any more from the land which I gave their fathers, only if they are careful to do according to all that I have commanded them, and according to all the law that my servant Moses commanded them." But they paid no attention, and Manasseh seduced them to do more evil than the nations whom the Lord had destroyed before the children of Israel. And the Lord spoke by his servants the prophets, saying, "Because Manasseh, king of Judah, has done these abominations, he has acted more wickedly than all the Amorites who were before him, and has also made Judah sin with his idols. Therefore, thus says the Lord of Israel, Behold, I am bringing such calamity upon Jerusalem and Judah, that whoever hears of it, both his ears will tingle. And I will stretch over Jerusalem the measuring line of Samaria, and the plummet of the house of Ahab. I will wipe Jerusalem as one wipes a dish, wiping it and turning it upside down. So I will forsake the remnant of my inheritance and deliver them to the hand of their enemies, and they shall become victims of plunder to all their enemies, because they have done evil in my sight, and they have provoked me to anger since the day their fathers came out of Egypt, even to this day. Moreover, Manasseh shed very much innocent blood, till he had filled Jerusalem from one end to another, besides his sins by which he made Judah sin in doing evil in the sight of the Lord. The next we look at 2 Chronicles 33, 1 to 20. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king. He reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. But he did evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the abominations of the nations whom the Lord has cast out before the children of Israel. For he rebuilt the high places which Hezekiah his father had broken down. He raised up altars for the Baals and made wooden images, and he worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. He also built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, "In Jerusalem shall my name be forever." And he built altars for all the hosts of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord. Also he caused his sons to pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom. He practiced soothsaying, used witchcraft and sorcery, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. He even set a carved image, the idol which he made in the house of God, of which God had said to David and to Solomon his son, "In this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever, and I will not again remove the foot of Israel from the land which I have appointed for your fathers, only if they are careful to do all that I have commanded them, according to the whole law and the statutes and the ordinances by the hand of Moses." So Manasseh seduced Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to do more evil than the nations whom the Lord had destroyed before the children of Israel. And the Lord spoke to Manasseh and his people, but they would not listen. Therefore the Lord brought upon them the captains of the army of the king of Assyria, who took Manasseh with hooks, bound him with bronze fetters, and carried him off to Babylon. Now when he was in affliction, he implored the Lord his God and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers and prayed to him. And he received his entreaty, heard his supplications, and brought him back to Jerusalem into his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord was God. After this, he built a wall outside the city of David on the west side of Gihon, in the valley as far as the entrance of the fish gate, and it enclosed Ophel, and he raised it to a very great height. Then he put military captains in all the fortified cities of Judah. He took away the foreign gods and the idols from the house of the Lord, and all the altars that he had built in the mount of the house of the Lord and in Jerusalem, and he cast them out of the city. He also repaired the altar of the Lord, sacrificed peace offerings and thanks offerings on it, and commanded Judah to serve the Lord God of Israel. Nevertheless, the people still sacrificed on the high places, but only to the Lord their God. Now the rest of the acts of Manasseh, his prayer to his God, and the words of the seers who spoke to him in the name of the Lord God of Israel, indeed they are written in the book of the kings of Israel. Also his prayer and how God received his entreaty and all his sin and trespasses, and the sites where he built high places and set up wooden images and carved images before he was humbled. Indeed, they are written among the sayings of Hosea. So Manasseh rested with his father, and they buried him in his own house. Then his son Amon reigned in his place.
Good morning, everyone. Normally people say it is a joy to be over here and share with you, but I won't really agree with that. Many months ago, I was wondering if I get a chance next to speak, what should I speak? And so I prayed, and then I got this ready by somewhere mid-November. And I was wondering how I'm going to share this, because this is not a sugary one. And then a few weeks ago, Sunny shared. I was like wondering, what does grow up mean? But the angle of his message is like, hey, I'm going to speak something like that. And then the next week, Sunil Gokavi came and he spoke. I'm like, wow. And the Holy Spirit does work in strange, or in modern language, weird ways. And so just do consider this as an extension of what they both had shared. The recordings are there on the Spotify, and it's on the website also, so you can take a look. Today's topic is something that we are quite ignorant of, but we practice. The way of the world in a Christian. And that is something we have. Now, most of us believe in this ideal situation, that a believer is one who reads and meditates on the Word of God. His joy is in it. He's delighting in it. He mutters and meditates with it, and then he practices it. And therefore, he will be like a tree planted by the waters, always having nourishment, always successful. Initially, children, they believe in Santa Claus, believe in the Christmas tree and the stars and all that stuff. They are awesome. Their faith is strong. There is even a lobster in the nativity play. They are happy, and they carry that on to a certain stage until it gets broken. The reality check comes in Psalm 73. verses 3 to 14. Of course, it's a long one. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you could read it. And the psalmist over here, we don't know who it is exactly. Might be Asaph during David's time or another Asaph, because they repeated the names. And in verse 3 of Psalm 73, he said, I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They are free from the burdens common to man. They are not plagued by human ills. Verse 11, they say, how can God know? Does the Most High have knowledge? This is what the wicked are like. They are always carefree. They increase in wealth. Surely in vain have I kept my heart pure. In vain have I washed my hands in innocence. All day long I have been plagued. I have been punished every morning. This is how many Christians look at it. Practically among the young adults, this oppression, this punishment is their college lecturer, or the person who set the question paper, or the person who scored their paper. That is the evil, the hand of Satan. Right? Every one of us has a different thing. Yes, I know, Carol is like, I'm not evil. There is a thing. And Rohina would share that very clearly many times. We have trauma in our childhood. And what trauma we suffer over there, we carried on into adulthood, into our relationships, into our jobs, into our Christian belief, or whatever belief we had when we were young. And when they broke, along with that, our hearts broke. And then we go into a certain pessimism that carries on into adulthood. Now let's look at King Manasseh. Now King Manasseh, his mom's name was Hephzibah. Hephzibah means Yahweh is my husband and his delight is in me. And she brought up this child called Manasseh in a time of God's favor to Hezekiah. Hezekiah was not supposed to exist at that time. He was supposed to die. And at that time he was born, and then shortly after he was born, he was 2 years old. He was made regent or co-regent to rule along with his dad, because dad didn't know how long he's going to be around. And he became king. He was meant to be Messiah. We normally attribute that to Jesus. We are not used to this word. He is meant to be Messiah, and according to Deuteronomy chapter 17, 14 to 20, Messiah's job is not to build walls, is not to build an army, collect all wealth and all that stuff. Messiah's job is to study the whole word of the law and then make a copy of it, show it to the priests, cross-verify it, and then make sure everybody follows it and they get back to God. Now, when Hezekiah got healing, he immediately started an independence battle, so to speak. Assyria did not come yet. That is Assyria around Hezekiah's time. Israel is there. Sargon was the king. They knew he was coming, and in the past, the Israeli kings, King Omri, King Ahab, they formed a coalition of all the people within this area, and they stood as an army that opposes Assyria. Now Hezekiah thought, maybe this is the time. Maybe I should do this. And he started a revolt. If you read Isaiah, Micah, Nahum, Jeremiah, all the prophets says, you idiot. Who asked you to go and fight? Trust in the Lord. Hezekiah didn't listen. He tried doing this and that, and in the midst of all of that was the pool of Siloam and all that stuff, all those portions that we read, Isaiah 38, 39, 35, 40, 41, it all comes over there. God is telling them, no. Now Manasseh at this time, he's watching his dad struggle in fear that Assyria is going to come, because they are really harsh. And by the time Manasseh comes, that gets extended little by little all the way down into Egypt. The first thing that Manasseh did, because he saw Assyria so big and dad always being scared and all the army generals acting like pregnant women, not my keyword, look in Isaiah. All the strong people who stand like Arnold Schwarzenegger are acting as though they are pregnant. And so the first thing he did was he went to Assyria, gave them all the gold and silver, and he said, I will be your vassal. He gave up independence, and without them even attacking and annexing the land, while the kingdom had not come all the way down, one small section now became part of Assyria. Now, Judah or Israel, they were located at the X. Anyone coming from Greece, Turkey and all, they're all the way there. They have to come over here and go down. Anyone coming from Babylon and Armenia and all of that, they have to come here and go down. Anyone in the desert, they have to come to Judah and come down, because this is not so great to cross. That is why they needed God's help to cross the Red Sea. It is not easy. The only easy land is there, Judah. And because they passed through that X, Solomon became rich. King David started getting help from Cyprus and Tyre, the richest countries. And slowly David became rich. Solomon became really rich. But what nobody says is that Manasseh became as rich or more richer than David and Solomon combined. He earned in taxes of all the things moving in between. Small people started setting up businesses, wholesale and all of that stuff. Normal producers, farmers, they all went out of Judah. They would send all their goods to Judah, and from Judah it would go and they would earn and tax and all of that stuff. And that is how Manasseh became rich. He became richer than David and Solomon together. He fought many wars along with Assyria. Instead of fighting for his people and for Yahweh, he said, hey, I'm here. Pass the ball to me. And Ashurbanipal, not related to me, Ashurbanipal said, okay, fine. And then he sent an army to Judah, and along with them went all the way down south to, the map's in there. He went down to Egypt and fought. And he won. Not only that, by this time, Judah, after Hezekiah, because he kept disobeying, the kingdom kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. Israel ceased to exist, shrink. And this Micah's Jerusalem, and it's just come all the way here. The border is at the capital. That is not safe for anyone. So using this chance of wars and all of that stuff, Manasseh accessed a little. And he accessed a little. And then he got a little from Edom, Moab. He started getting from the Arabs down here, started getting back some land from Egypt. He did start getting it, and he's like, wow, successes are coming little by little. There's a good chance that we are going to prosper. We will get the whole kingdom back, because remember, Judah never considered Israel as a country. One day our brothers will come to us. They will return to the motherland. Anybody has an idea of who else says this these days? Sorry? No. An entire kingdom coming back to the motherland. No. China says this about Nepal, Tibet, Arunachal Pradesh. They say about that. And Russia is doing the same thing. Return to the motherland. Or to return to the fatherland, they would call it. And they are annexing Ukraine, Crimea, and all that stuff. Right? And in all of this, Israel, which was once poor, suddenly becomes rich, and most of the money is coming from Assyria, which we would call America. FDI is coming in. Companies are being set up, marketing, shipping, everything. Judah has no ports. They have no access to water, but now Judah has ports because Philistine was conquered by Assyria, and therefore what belongs to Assyria now belongs to Judah. They became rich by FDI. Can I get help, please? Thank you. Now, on the other hand, Manasseh ruled for 55 years. David ruled for about 40 years. I'm not sure. I didn't check about King Solomon. He is the only king in God's holy land who ruled for that long. That's a good thing, right? Many kings were killed by God. They died in wars. They had gangrene. They had a broken leg. They were struck by leprosy and all that stuff. He had none of those. At age 67, he most likely died of cholesterol because there was no stent operations. His prosperity possibly was showing. He was kind of a fat man. Everybody would say this is a good report card. But the authors of Kings, Chronicles, and we believe that God also says this, that Manasseh was not a good king. He was one of, in fact, the worst kings to be alive. And he is responsible for making the people sin. Why? See, the people were anyway sinning. But why does God hold Manasseh and say he led them to sin? What is the role of a Messiah? He forgot that. Ashur Banipal kept a very detailed record of all things that he gave, money he gave, and all that stuff. All of this in modern day times is a good thing. If India, with the help of America, can push out China and annex and secure Arunachal Pradesh and Sri Lanka and all that stuff, it will be considered as a good thing, as Lord himself is there with India. This is how we view modern times, and we think there is prosperity, right? This is the same logic by which Manasseh the Messiah became Manasseh the Assyrian vassal. Now let's look at the litany list. What are the complaints? We read all of that, right? But the thing is, he saw Assyria's success and assumed that their ways and their gods work. He worshipped not only the Syrian gods, but the Canaanite gods, the Philistine gods, which are basically the Greek gods, and he brought them all into the temple. He helped raise all those tax collectors, and which we normally find in the Gospels, right? People hate them. Where did they start? Manasseh's time. They would dispossess the people in their own land and then make them slaves in their own land to work over there for a salary. This is forbidden. He did not give justice to the poor. They would all go to the streets and revolt and say, no, this is not right. God does not allow that. He would kill them. And most likely, all the words of the seers, those books, it is because every time a seer wrote a book, it's like, this is proof that I have communicated God's word to them and I've written it down, but he hasn't listened. So this is going to be his indictment in a reeve later. Reeve is court case. And that is how we have the books of Isaiah. We have the books of Jeremiah. And he most likely killed Isaiah too, his grand uncle. He cut him in half. Because Isaiah is no king. Manasseh is the king. Who is he to question? At the same time, we might say, okay, fine, he became an unbeliever, he left Yahweh and all that stuff. No. He maintained the temple sacrifices. Look at Jeremiah 7. It says, hey, don't say this is the temple, therefore we will be saved. God will not neglect us. No, don't trust that. I'm going to take away my temple. Psalm 50, verse 8 is like, I do not blame you for your sacrifices, which are always there in front of me. But if I were hungry, I will definitely not ask you. They practiced it as though it was a Davidic condition. As long as you keep the sacrifices going, as long as you keep that lamp burning. Many religions have that. As long as you keep that lamp burning, the God is there. He consulted spirits, sorcery, parrot speaking, whatnot and all things that we normally use for entertainment on the beach. Those are the things that he consulted with to secure his future. He brought back the fertility cults. Now, what does the fertility cult mean? Male prostitution, female prostitution, where? Not outside the temple. There are rooms inside the temple. You can just go, and then you are now connected to the divine power, and the divine power passes through you, and therefore you carry that and go back to your village. But the fertility cults were not working so well. He sacrificed his son at the valley of Hinnom, which is what later on became Gehenna, and in the New Testament we call it hell. That is where they would do it. Now, these are two maps. Those of you who might have studied a bit of history, this is called the This is called the Fertile Crescent. It's a C shape. There was always greenery over there. But this is it currently today. There's only a little greenery there. Everything else is getting barren. It is dry. And so, for the sake of a better harvest, Manasseh sacrificed his son. We will talk about that. Now, the reason why it's all getting barren is there are mountain ranges over here. The Taurus Mountains, the Pontiac Mountains, and the Zagros Mountains. These are the main culprits. All the rivers more or less go from there, and it seems to go this side, but it actually goes like this and then empties out over here into the Persian, into the Red Sea this side. Persian Gulf is over here. The water is purposely diverted and it's going through the land of Israel and Judah. And it's not working. Now, why isn't it working? In the mountains, there's magnesium, there's calcium, there's phosphates and all of that stuff. All of these are what you call salts. And when it comes into the land, come to my village, it's called Karakal. Many of the fields, you go stand over there, you will see the sun reflecting into your face and it feels that the mud is glass. It's because there's that much salt sitting on top of it. If you step on it, just like water on top of an ice lake, it'll crack open. It can cut your feet. That is how bad salts can ruin your land. Nothing will grow there. And so, a land which was fertile crescent, which is right now just barren. Because of that, Judah is over here, Egypt is over here. Egypt has a different water source. It is growing because of the Nile, which is connected to the Red Sea. It's coming over there because of flooding. It has more than enough food for the entire section over here. It can feed everyone. But because of that, Pharaoh wants to be in control. And Pharaoh would always more or less come all the way up to there, and his kingdom used to extend like this before Israel crossed the Red Sea. That is how great Pharaoh was. His kingdom was from here all the way to up there. This is all Turkey and the Assyrian kingdom and all of those. Abraham most likely was around from there. This is the history of the Mesopotamian problem. And slowly, kingdoms started moving up from north, from Armenia, which is where Christianity was, popularly accepted. From Armenia, people were moving all the way south, and then they hear that Egypt has food, and so everybody's focus eventually is there. And which one is standing at the gates of Egypt? Jericho. Over here is desert. Jerusalem. It's standing in the way, and in the middle, this all portion is, at that time, it was still a desert. You still have to go through God's land, and you have to pay taxes. But what if we could wipe them out? What if we could win that land? Then that is good. Manasseh knew that this was going to happen, or he thought it was going to happen, while the prophets are saying, don't worry, the Lord will protect his people. Do not worry, but you will be under Assyria. Eventually, Manasseh gave over because the rains weren't coming. He sacrificed his son at the fire. God said, if you obey me and keep my words, I will send seasonal rains. Otherwise, you have to depend on the mountain rivers and your land will die. God knew the history of the problem and he purposely kept his people over there to be a light to the world. Now, child sacrifice, we all know about this. This is the sin of the Amorites, which was mentioned in Genesis 15 and 2 Kings. We just read it, right? They first started with vegetable sacrifice. This is Cain's sacrifice. Abel's sacrifice was the lamb, and slowly some people started sacrificing lamb. There were some religions which were still sacrificing vegetables. That is what we call Shankaranti, Pongal, Onam. All right. And so while this is going on and this is going on, they started another kind of sacrifice. Let's tap into the power by male and female prostitution. It's still not working because the rains aren't coming. The land is getting salty and it's not working. And so let me offer the fruit of my womb. Now, we all know this. It doesn't really specifically spell out in our Bible. But if you find the other writings of the Jews, there is one book called the Book of Wisdom. We don't know who wrote it, but it was written 50 years only before Jesus, towards the end of the Hasmonean kingdom. And it's called Wisdom, short Wisdom. And if you look into a Catholic Bible, it is called the Deuterocanon. It is over there. And it reads and explains exactly what the sin of the Amorites was. The Amorites and Canaanites were hated by God because of works of sorcery, impious sacrifices. These merciless murderers of children, devourers of human flesh, and initiates engaged in a blood ritual, and parents who took their own hands, with their own hands, defenseless lives, and they sacrificed it. And because of that, God chose to wipe them out and put his own people over there. This is the history. We don't have it very clearly spelled out over here. Even though we read it in 1 Kings 21 and 2 Chronicles 33, we don't really see it. But that is the thing. We find it hinted in Micah chapter 6. And it says, what shall I come before the Lord? With what shall I come and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come down before him with burnt offerings, with the calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Now, these first two paragraphs are what David and Solomon followed. Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? This is Manasseh. He has shown you, O mortal. This is Micah's warning from the Lord. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. But they would not do that. Now, we earlier saw the map. From this small, it became that big. The Assyrian kingdom became that big. They expanded like a balloon. And to maintain control, it's going to be very difficult. So they would do certain strategies. Take Babylonians, put them in Israel. Take Israelis, put them in Armenia. So the Samaritans or Samaritans were basically Egyptians and Babylonians and Turkish people all mixed together sitting over there in Samaria. This is where the origin was. Assyria started this. It was a practice that was never followed in any kingdom anywhere. They initiated this practice. The other way of doing is, no kids here, it's called the human kebab, shish kebab. Skewer the human, peel their skin off, put salt and pepper and chili on them, and leave them on the terrace with a peg. And they'll be hanging like that. The skewer will come through their mouth. They will still be alive. They're not dead. This was Assyria's way of maintaining power, and Manasseh saw this and he was terrified and like, I am your humble servant. But at the same time, Babylon was always creating problems. So Ashurbanipal's dad, Esarhaddon, he gave that part to his eldest son, Shamash Shum Ukin. But by the time Ashurbanipal, he started expanding it and he got all the way to Egypt with Manasseh's help. And the elder brother was like, no, this is not right. I get this tiny spot called Babylon. It's a tiny spot. And he gets this giant kingdom. I am the firstborn. I must get it. And so he knew he could not win. And so he reached up not to the people of the Greeks or the Phoenicians or Ionia, the Lydians, the Cimmerians, the Indo-Aryans, the Armenians. Indo-Aryans, remember? North India? He partnered with them. But on the west, he had Elam, he had Media, he had the other people on those sides. He had some of the Arabs on the south, but he needed someone on this side. And so he appealed to Egypt for help. And remember, it's at that border, there's half fertile land and the other half is a desert. You have to go through Judah. And Ashurbanipal is like, how did Egypt come to my brother's aid? Definitely, Manasseh would have had a hand in it. And so you find that only in 2 Chronicles chapter 33. That is why I asked for that portion also to be read. And he was taken away like cattle, shackles on his arms and a hook in his nose. A Messiah, a leader being led away like domestic cattle. Can I have some help, please? Thank you. Next one. Thank you. Ashurbanipal eventually won all his wars. His brother, when he realized that the siege is there and the gates are broken, instead of fighting like a brave man and fighting his younger brother, he knew the horror that the Assyrian army would inflict on him. He didn't want to be tandoori chicken. And so he committed suicide. Unfortunately, Ashurbanipal actually wasn't thinking of doing that to his elder brother. He thought, I will imprison him and give him a pension, and so he can live quietly, but nobody communicated the memo to him. And when his brother committed suicide, he was disturbed. There is no war that Assyria or Ashurbanipal went for after this. He turned to religion. He started maintaining records of the past. He started going into all the lands that he had conquered, and he started digging up their libraries, their holy texts, and he started translating it back to Akkadian. So he started taking Sumerian, translating it to Akkadian. He started taking Aramaic and Hebrew and Sumerian and Arabic and all of those languages, Elamites, and he started translating it and putting it. And we all talk about the Library of Alexandria. This was the first coordinated effort of having one place where all knowledge could be. Manasseh's plan failed. And over there, Chronicles, the authors over there say, he humbled himself before God and he asked for help. Now, understand, the book of Chronicles is written for a different purpose than the book of Kings. The book of Kings is all about, even though we thought our hope is going to be in a king, in Joshua and Judges, where everybody is doing whatever they saw right, it did not work out well. And therefore, God threw them away. That is the last chapter of the book of Kings. But the book of Chronicles is to the exiles and who are wondering, should we even live over here? Is God's presence even over here? And the book of Chronicles is written like, because the Judaic line, the Davidic line is there, God brought them back. And so God brought Manasseh back. So there is hope for you. And that is why they are writing this portion. They are writing it with a different interest. And so Manasseh may or may not have prayed. He might have come back and said it. We do not know. This is all written years after, during Ezra and Nehemiah's time, was when Chronicles are being compiled. And Manasseh mourned and asked God for help. His plans failed. This is not the kind of success that he was looking for. Many people are struggling because America is not going to allow Indians to come just that easily. And already, knowing that Trump would win, you should have seen the matrimony section in all the newspapers in Andhra. If you have green card, do not apply for my daughter. You're not worthy to marry my daughter. In the past, it used to be, if you have green card, please apply to this matrimony lad. I'm not kidding. And these are Christians. Chennai had ads like that. You must be Nadar, Christian, but no green card. This is the way of the world in a Christian. And so, Chronicle says, Manasseh was brought back by God. History, unfortunately, tells a different story. Ashurbanipal's records are there. Thank you. Manasseh once again made an appeal. It's because when Ashurbanipal attacked Egypt, the king of Egypt, instead of bravely standing and fighting, he ran away down to Nubia and maybe went all the way down south. And later on, when Ashurbanipal went back and he's mourning, he's like, oh, now is my chance. And so, the king, or the pharaoh's name is Mr. Psamtikos. He's the song of the gods. And that is where we get the book of Psalms. Not all biblical names are Christian. And so he came back and he started creating trouble. And Manasseh is like, see, problem is coming. I can help, pick me. And Ashurbanipal is like, I'm tired. What is all this for? What is the point? My brother is dead. And my children are not the people who I thought would be. Within the next 30 years, Assyria would cease to exist. And Ashurbanipal has a good idea of the potential of his sons. They didn't do well. And so Ashurbanipal gave money, army, raw materials, and he told the kingdoms nearby, just like the kingdoms nearby Solomon were given instructions to send material to build the temple and to build Solomon's palace and to build structures and fortresses and all. Ashurbanipal sent it. All of that, the tax records are there. And then when he reached Jerusalem, the word is like this. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord is God. Seems pretty transactional, isn't it? What is our faith like? Is it wavering with the chance of opportunity, like Sunny had mentioned from the book of James? What is our idea of success? Manasseh's life seemed to be blown all over the place, depending on which way success seemed to be blowing at that time. And we would all worry if that were to happen to us, right? At that time, there was a plan of God. A lot of people would say, okay, maybe God wasn't speaking just like he was speaking. What is God's plan for us? What is God's plan for India? We do not know. And so we would think like, okay, that was not there. God's plan for Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is just like, you would call in the Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth. All the kingdoms of Middle Earth, Rohan, Isengard, and Hobbiton. God's will was to punish all of them. It was to punish Egypt. The entire Fertile Crescent was to be punished. That was God's will. And God told all of them, you don't fight. If you want to live, don't fight. I will take care of you. But you will be servants. But all of them decided to fight. They started to try different things. Some of them even decided to worship their gods because, you know what, see, it's working. And Manasseh is working on the basis of his grandfather Ahaz. He went over there, made an offering over there. He saw a bronze altar over there. Sargon is winning and there is an altar. You know what? Mr. Civil Engineer, herewith I attach the plans for a bronze altar to be built right in the temple and chuck our altar away. That is what Ahaz did. So, grandchild did exactly that. Isaiah, Micah, they prophesied that God would punish all of them using Assyria, and then later on Assyria would be punished by Babylon, and then they would cease to exist, and then Babylon would be punished, and God will bring his people back. That is what was prophesied, and Manasseh knew it, but he didn't want it. Let's compare. Can you change the slide? Thank you. Now let's compare Manasseh, Messiah, to Jesus, Messiah. The first one is his purpose was to lead people to God. And because they are prospering, because they are following God, the nations around them in the X would know that here is a kingdom which trusts God, and therefore this is the way back to God. Because remember, humanity is kicked out of the garden. And remember, the temple is filled with Garden of Eden imagery, and the middle of it is something we call the ark, the cherubim, and the mercy seat, which does not exist. It was a fictional thing. That is the Garden of Eden, to come and meet God in Jerusalem, his mountain. Jesus at the same time came, I have come to reveal the Father to the nations. Now the cultural situation, we already know that. They had to stay faithful to God in spite of Assyrian oppression. They didn't even have invasion. They didn't have occupation. They had oppression. They were supposed to be under that burden and suffering. But yet, Manasseh didn't choose that. Jesus too lived under worse conditions than that. Not just oppression, but occupation, of dispossession, of taxes. And he was faithful. In sufferings, next slide please. In sufferings, Manasseh chose to get out of these difficulties by whatever plan possible, just like Sunny had shared. But Jesus said, no, Father, if you will, yet not my will, but yours be done. He stayed under it. The path that Manasseh chose was based on the ideas that God's ways do not work. A new way has come about. You got to wake up and therefore be associated with the powerful people. Many countries associate with Russia, with US, with China, and do the same thing instead of trusting in God. And Jesus said, and he insisted, that even though there are sufferings, 1 Peter and James, we should stick through the suffering, persevere, and like a polished gemstone or like gold, refined gold, your faith will be. And despite loss, we should follow God's ways. A few weeks ago, I've lost the count, there was a church in Congo, and the Islamist rebels surrounded it and said, "Give up Jesus or die." They beheaded 70 men, women, and children who said, "Jesus is God, I will die for him." Can you imagine teenagers doing that? Young adults doing that? 70 men, women, and children were beheaded, and then the church was burnt over there. What is our faith like? Manasseh was one of the worst ones. Judah grew in prosperity, just like Japan, just like Singapore. With the aid of other countries, they prospered. They are one of the richest countries and most stable countries in the world right now. But yet God calls them poor, they are wayward, and they are hostile to God's plans. How much of the world do we have in us? Most of our churches, you can't even see or understand that there is Jesus over here. Many Christians and stores are like, yeah, they worship Santa Claus, and then there is Christ. Somebody called Christ. That is who they worship. Who knows what's Jesus? Our churches are stuck with properties. They are stuck with court cases up to the Supreme Court about who should be the elder and leader of the church. There are financial irregularities. Money is vanished. There are rapes. There are divorces. There are problems between brother and brother about encroaching of land. Is this the church that Christ Jesus has called? Churches are more interested about their stock portfolio. Yes, churches now have stock. And most of the stock is in worship leaders. That's a story for another time. I'd just like to remind us all, when Jesus, Pastor Jacob Cherian, Jesus went to the temple and he so-called cleansed the temple with what? With a rope. What was the olden day belt? A rope. He took off his belt like my dad would and then whipped everyone and saying, that's the end. What Jesus was doing there is not cleansing the temple. It's saying the way of the temple, the way of the Old Testament is over. You cannot come to God the Father through this way anymore. And Jesus, before he left, he also said the same thing. This way of the world is going to end. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and all, especially Isaiah, that is where we have this idea that a new heaven would come and a new earth would come. The way of the New Testament is going to be over. That is an uncomfortable truth. But the New Testament way of the world is going to get over. That is why at the end, there's going to be only hope. Faith, hope, and love. Sorry, there's only love, right? Faith, hope, and love. Faith, no longer necessary because we'll be there with God. There is no more temple. There's no more worship service. There is no church because everybody's living with God. And so faith and hope are gone. You can see it. So what is the need for a special hope? Only that will remain would be love. The New Testament way of Christianity, the New Testament way of working, the New Testament way of living is going to be over. Our purpose is to lead people back to Christ. The judgment. Sorry. Can we try the next? Yeah. The judgment on this world has been declared. The fulfillment of it hasn't started yet. We're living in a grace period time, just like Manasseh was living and all of them. And we all had a call to make a choice. Are you going to go my way or are you going to choose your own way? But the world will resist it. That is why there are persecutions. There are calls in Chhattisgarh for Christians to be killed. There are calls upon churches and hospitals to stop talking about Jesus and not have assembly. There is a call to cut down moral science class. All of those things are there. They are resisting. But we are all interested in what is God's plan for my life. FOMO stands for fear of missing out. What if I miss out the best thing that God has for me? And whatever land you have is going to burn and go away. You still want more land? There are Christians in our churches Not just BICF. I'm not talking just about BICF, but as a whole, whether it's Brethren, Methodist, CSI. I'm from the Brethren, and I've been in the Pentecostal things for a while. And they are thinking like, in this time and day, if you don't have a third income, you cannot survive in India. Now, what is the third income? Husband and wife are earning, and then they have separate apartments that they can give out for rent. Or they have extra stock, extra mutual funds. And without that, you cannot survive in India. And my friends say the same thing, and eventually they keep saying it so badly that eventually they end up in Canada and America living without heating, cooking their own food because now they can't afford. Let's think of this. We know that anyone over here needs about 30 to 40,000 to survive in Bangalore, right? How many believe that it's not the case? If you live in La La Land like me, raise your hand. All right, good. You need about 30 to 40,000 to survive. And if your maid who cooks for you, who cleans for you, is a Christian, wouldn't you expect the same for that maid? There are only few hours to make breakfast and lunch before you leave for work. How many places can your maid go and work and earn that 30 to 40,000? No, we pay about 2 to 3,000. Can you live on that? So if you have to pay your Christian maid 30, 40,000, can you survive in Bangalore? It's called foolishness. That is why this way of the world, this way of New Testament has to end, where there will be no more hunger, no more suffering, no more oppression, no more slavery, no more tears. The way of this world has to end. And as representatives, as images of Christ over here in this earth, we need to live a different life. God's purposes for this world will be fulfilled irrespective of our involvement. The question is, will you choose to be in it? The last few verses of Daniel, those who go out and save people from their sins will shine as bright as the stars in the heaven. There will be signs for humanity. That's what the stars mean. If you don't know that, read Genesis 1. The sun, moon, and the stars are supposed to be signs in the heaven for people to know the will of God and to follow. And those who save people as though from the fire, 1 Peter and 2 Peter also, they will shine as bright as the stars in the heaven. As the world is crumbling and burning and collapsing, we are called to live as stars, leading people to Christ. Next slide, please. Here are a few warnings. Matthew 25:32. At the judgment time, we are all uncomfortable with this, but this is the reality. The sheep and goat will be separated. The sheep will be kept separate, the goats will be separate. The goats are actually going to die. The sheep will live in God's kingdom. All those, we love the Sermon on the Mount, but we've skipped this verse. We always talk about, don't judge, because Matthew chapter 7 verse 1 is don't judge, brother. But all those who say, Lord, Lord, and do great things for me, they won't enter unless they do the will of the Father who sent Jesus. Next one, please. 1 John, we know this, right? We teach it to our Sunday school children. Practicing this is very hard. That is why we have problems of addiction, gambling, pornography, all of these things, acquiring more and more risk in terms of property, stock market and all. And then finally, God did not help. My property is all vanished because Trump sneezed. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, all of these come from the world. It does not come from the Father. And we are Christians who follow the Father through His Son, Jesus Christ. Our purpose, next one please, is to be the salt, the light, and the city on a hill. The city on a hill is not some place like Bangalore, which is a city on a hill, if you have to think about it. A city on a hill has huge walls, and it gives refuge to those who are outside of the city in a time of conflict, in time of difficulty. Are our churches places of refuge for Christians and non-Christians? Next one, please. We live in a time like this, where we go and ask God, God, please intervene and make sure my brother shares property with me. And Jesus is like, hey, what man? Who asked you to make me the mediator? A man's life is not found in the abundance of possessions. It is a false metric. Next slide, please. Proverbs 15 verse 6. Sorry. Can we go 2 slides back, please? While we are still followers of Jesus, John 16:33, there will be persecutions because the master was persecuted, the servants will not get a better treatment. 2 slides ahead, please. Proverbs 15. The goal is not exactly, to be a beggar, but at the same time, it's better to have little and live with the fear of God than to have many and be lost in sin. Hebrews 12 says we have to persevere, and that's the same thing that Sunny and Sunil talked about. We need to persevere in God's kingdom and God's ways. Sometimes there will be loss, but our faith will shine forward as refined gold. James, yes, we saw that. And the end of that is an indestructible reward. Next slide, please. Hebrews 12, 28 and 29. We don't pay too much attention to this, but look at this. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. And why does he put this here? All those who say, Lord, Lord, it's not going to work. It's going to be a new way. It's a new way. It's a new world. Na, 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 na. We all love that song. Phil Collins is awesome, but we are not prepared for it. We are definitely not prepared. For the past few years, people have been praying for rains in the Sahara Desert, and the Sahara, God answered. Places like Nigeria received only half of the annual rainfall. Sahara received 400% of the amount of rain. They were not prepared for flood-like situations, so their cars ended up in the Mediterranean Sea. It crossed 3 boundaries and ended up there. When change comes, we are not prepared for it. Those living in a desert do not know how to live in Cherrapunji. Right? If you look at it, look at the news. The news is blooming and saying, Sahara is turning green. Is this good or bad? It's going to be a new way. It's going to be a new world. And may we ask God to help us live in accordance with our calling, not just simply saying, Lord, Lord, not simply saying, I go to BICF, I go to church, I fast every day, I take communion. No, that is not going to save you. Only those who follow the will of the Father, not living the will of the Father for my life, which is prosperity. May his name be glorified.